Welcome to another edition of Sensorless Podcast, brought to you by our sister company OGRE, purveyors of sweet swag and masters of witty wares. Click the link below to check out our gamer apparel and accessories made by gamers for gamers. So once again, joining us tonight on our panel is yours truly, Pigeon Poop, Russell Engel, and I've been dropping plops since 1982. Matt Meatball Conley, owner of 2 cats and friend of dolphins. And lastly, Mark the Red Raccoon Lee. Oh yes, you are. Probably secretly your real father, depending on where you live. And so tonight we have a special show for you where we are going to delve into games that we three have felt have been the most influential in our lives and video games as a whole. So say hey, guys.
Hey.
All right, that was great. I'm so glad you're with me. So just a little side note for everybody. Sorry that we didn't have our podcast last week. Basically, it snowed 13 plus inches where we live. We were out of power for a while. Matt had some family stuff that he needed to attend to, and then I don't really know what Mark was doing, but I'm sure it was important. Like
I was pondering life as I stood next to the window and drank my OJ.
Right.
That's super important. That's more important than everything we were doing.
Yes.
So to start off, I guess to give you a synopsis of what we're going to talk about tonight, we already said that we're going to talk about some of the games that we have fallen in love with and the games that we personally think that are influential in gaming history, at least for us. So I guess to begin that, we have to talk about our past. Influential games that started us on our path as gamers. So for me, I would have to say the very first game that I really fell in love with and I started playing and just realized that, you know, video games are always going to be a part of my life no matter how old I got, was Final Fantasy VII. Now, I wasn't allowed to like have a gaming console until I got older because well, you know, my parents weren't opposed to it, but they also thought it was from the devil a little bit. So,
I mean, that's not too far off for Final Fantasy VII. That's
right,
a pretty, it's a pretty dark game.
I mean,
Final
you're only
Fantasy
summoning
is safe.
things, right?
No, Final Fantasy is safe. You should check out the Shin Megami Tensei series. You're just like yeah.
And I mean, I love my mom and dad 100 times more than anything in life, but they also were very much like at Christmas time, you will get presents, but it'll be clothes. And so, like, and then whenever you got home from school, you needed to cut wood, and so that we had fire to like stoke the furnace. So that was my youth.
So when did you start playing Final Fantasy VII, if that's the case?
Final Fantasy VII, so it was, gosh, I would say that I was in high school. I didn't really have my first, I had a Nintendo and I played Super Mario Brothers and everything like that, and I loved that, but really Final Fantasy VII was when my early years in high school. It was kind of an influential part of my life, not only because my father passed, but also because I started playing other things like D&D, and RPGs was just a way, an outlet for me to kind of not necessarily think about the hardships and the things that I was going through, but more so like, you know, embrace like a different reality, a different world for just a little bit, and you know, have fun and not worry about the repercussions of it.
For sure, especially considering in Final Fantasy VII you have Cloud, who is like the definition of like teenage angst. So
yeah, I mean,
Yes.
and he has hair like something about Maria or something about Mary or whatever. Like I don't know what him and Sephiroth were doing, but
that's the real backstory. You know, all the identity politics aside, or not politics, but his identity crisis aside, that's exactly what happened. He spiked his hair up with semen.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Pigeon. Which Final Fantasy is your favorite? Is it 7 just for that reason?
yeah, it has to be 7 for sure. It was also one of the games that I feel like you could play forever and never be done with it. Like,
I'm not gonna lie, I play that game probably once a year.
yeah.
Maybe.
I keep going back to it too. It's super sweet game. I love it. But what up, Lawless? But the next thing that I really think started me on my path was probably Def Jam. I don't know if you guys ever remember Def Jam, but I mean, if you could be a hip hop rapper and be kicking the crap out of another hip hop rapper, that is the way you should live life.
What about Parappa the Rapper?
Parappa the Rapper. Kick, punch us all in the mind. Yes.
Rhythm games are shit.
Absolutely. Freaking love rhythm games.
How about you, Mark? Like, what do you think was your first real love?
It's interesting. It's interesting that you went for Final Fantasy VII first, because my influential game would be Final Fantasy X. And I've played video games all my life. So before 10, I've played, countless amounts of games. But I think as a kid, I didn't really appreciate gaming as a whole. I played games basically for how fun it was, the mechanics of the game. So even though I've played classics like A Link to the Past or, the older Mario games, I didn't really pay attention to story. And I think it's when I started playing Final Fantasy X, I was probably 10 years old, maybe even younger, that I fully appreciated what it had to offer. And it sort of got me thinking, gaming is an art form, because not only did I care for the characters, I like the art. I think that game still has some of the best graphics for PS2 for being such an early game.
Oh, for sure. Especially considering you look at Final Fantasy VII, we were talking about earlier, with its terrible Lego graphics. The amount of progress that they made just in a console generation between the two of those is absolutely freaking astounding.
Yeah, and I like the parallel because Final Fantasy VII was the first game on PS1, and that pushed the PS1 to its limits, because I think that was one of the first RPGs, if not the first, to go full 3D. Final Fantasy X brought the PS2 to its limits probably a year or two into its life cycle, and I thought it was amazing because the storyline was amazing. I just loved everything about it. And to this day, I would still put that game at number 2 on my all-time list.
the main character's voice, because I swear
Okay, we're not gonna talk about the laugh.
no. You like ha 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 ha.
You know what? That
I
was
mean,
very
give me a
awkward.
break, Mark.
I'm not gonna lie. If I had to take points off that game, it would be that scene.
But the game was amazing. The story was absolutely freaking incredible. They did such an amazing job on the game, especially the progression. Like, you're basically watching all of these, youths going through what they believe is like some form of like religious cycle, and then their entire religion gets just completely shattered in front of their eyes, and everything that they knew and believed to be true turned out to be a complete farce. It was beautiful in terms of story, because you got to watch their characters develop over the progress of that, and they did an amazing job. I didn't get to play the game until I was like 24, 25, so like whenever I was playing it, the story and the depth of it just blew my freaking mind, more so than I probably would have whenever I was a kid. But it was such a good game.
It's such a good game. And I think we're kind of spoiled as gamers nowadays because we don't like linear games. And this was one of the first RPGs that was really linear, because you just move forward. Towards the end of the game, you can kind of travel back and forth to different places, but it was, for the most part, very linear.
Absolutely.
I mean, back in the day, I didn't even care. The story was so good, I didn't even mind.
I appreciate the linearity, man, because it allows them to develop a narrative. Whenever you look at open world games, like I'm playing through Assassin's Creed Origins right now, and the open world stuff is awesome, but like there's this awkward thing of like tasks that you have to do in between, story elements. And then whenever you have a linear game, it's boom, plot point after plot point after plot point, and it makes it so that they're able to craft your exact experience and be able to tell the narrative in a way that you can't, do inside of an open world game. So the linearity is fantastic. I think more games should have some form of linearity to it, just so that you can experience a story the way that they want you to experience it.
I mean, my favorite thing about it though was the fact that the main character is just like oblivious that he was in that world. He's like, and so then a giant lizard demon attacked our ship, and I thought to myself, why do I hate my dad so much?
I hate him.
Dang it, Jacked.
But I mean, going back on the whole point about linear, like how linear the game is, I feel like, Final Fantasy 13 was absolutely crucified for being so linear. I think in this game it makes it makes perfect sense, because their group is on a journey to defeat sin, and they have to go from point to point, to different temples, and they're going straight for Sin, the main antagonist. So I don't think there was time in that game where you can actually go back to different cities and hang out. I mean, other than playing Blitzball, which was done at a save point, you're moving forward the whole time.
I think the big problem with Final Fantasy 13 was that it was a combination of the linearity of it. Of course, it was, and it wasn't just like linearity is bad linearity. It was hallways and bridges. Too, That's all it was. Hallways and bridges, and then of course you get the Grand Pulse, and it opens up for like 3 chapters, and then goes back to linear again until the end of the game. And it's just, I don't know, the narrative itself wasn't very compelling. Like there was some compelling moments in it, but overall it was like really, really forced emotion, and it didn't hit home in the same way that a lot of other games managed to, with all the same elements that 13 had. So sure. There was a lot of problems with that game overall, and it was mainly that most of the characters weren't likable. I wanted to punch Hope in his stupid little face.
Hey, but we're not talking about what we hate here, guys. like that's a different podcast, okay? So Matt, what's one of the games that you feel like really helped you fall in love with video games?
Going in a different direction. I started playing games way before this, but I didn't become a gamer per se until I started playing Lineage 2 on PC. It was a MMORPG, and it was the first MMO that I ever got. So I started out, I had built my first computer upon recommendation of a friend of mine on the internet, and he sent me parts that I needed to buy and helped me go through the process of building it. And then I found the private server for Lineage 2, which all the moral issues aside of that, I was 13, get off me. But it was such a good time, because the moving away from whenever we were talking about linearity a minute ago, you had this whole massive giant open world, and you created your character, and everything that you do, it changes the way that your character looks and all this stuff. And then the player versus player combat was amazing. The PvE was basically non-existent, but I didn't care about that at the time. But the whole game was just absolutely amazing. I had such a blast playing it. And then there was a community aspect of it. Whenever I was in high school, I wouldn't say that I was unsocial, but I definitely wasn't the most social person in the school. I wasn't like a football player or anything like that. And the school that I came from, we had a graduating class of 92 people, so it was a really, really small school. So if you weren't social, you basically had no social life, which was really me at that time. So it allowed me to have a social life. I met a lot of cool people. There was so much stuff going on in that game that was amazing for me, and it really turned me into who I became as far as a social person goes. So
dude, Lineage 2 was a sweet game. I feel like was that a game that came out pretty close to around the time of oh gosh, what was it? Not EverQuest, but because we had
it was after EverQuest, but it was before World of Warcraft.
Yes,
WoW came out a couple years after it. This was 2002, maybe 2003, something like that. I don't remember the exact years because I suck at time, but it was it was awesome.
What is time?
So, but yeah, going to what my buddy Todd in chat is saying right now. Yeah, I used to show people this game all the time. We'd have computer lab, and I would basically pull it up on a flash drive or whatever it was I used at the time, and would launch it on the computers and just play that game inside a computer class, because for some reason I thought I was cooler than everybody. But yeah, that was some great times. Great memories.
Nice. At my computer lab, we had every cookie disabled. I'm surprised I could get on basic internet.
I mean, in my computer lab, we played RuneScape, and this game was hilarious.
Yes, RuneScape.
The best. So we would go to the wilderness, and we would bring randoms, and we're like, "Do you want to join our clan?" We'd say yes, and we'd hang out, and then we'd take them deep into the wilderness, kill them, grab all his gear, log out, and that was the best. We made so much money bamboozling people, and I'm probably getting some bad karma back from that.
I know that was the old school version of the game that people play a lot now, where you run around basically as a bunch of naked people, and you have to make guns and stuff on the server. What's that game called?
Is it Rust?
The Rust.
Yeah.
Where your dongers
where
your dongers are bigger than the guns that you have.
Exactly.
I mean,
there's so much
go for realism. I mean, it's not quite as cool as Dead or Alive as far as my fix of nudity, but
those physics though.
All right, so
I feel like they spent more time in that game focusing on the titty physics than they did anything.
hey,
Well, here's the thing: the physics are bad. The physics are bad, but whatever.
The game as a whole was bad. It was
point.
pure fan service. That game was nothing more than fan service.
I mean, beach volleyball. Come on.
Exactly.
Actually, hold on. I'm not gonna lie. You can say all you want about Dead or Alive beach volleyball, but that was a very solid game. That was very fun to play.
I don't know. So if we're talking about fighting games, I have to mention Soul Blade. So it was the very first game before Soul Calibur. If you guys have never played Soul Blade and you ever get a chance to, you need to. That game is better than Tekken, better than any other fighting game other than maybe Def Jam, because I don't know. Like, Def Jam is just sweet in its own regard. I mean, when you could play as Ghostface Killer. Anyway, I've talked about that. Moving on.
Wait, hold on. Killer Instinct.
Yeah, Killer Instinct was awesome too. Yeah. That was a great game.
And then Mortal Kombat, of course. You know,
one of my favorite fighting games was Power Stone on the Dreamcast. Yes. That game was so much fun. Me and my cousin used to get so mad at each other. We would literally almost get into fist fights over that game. It was great.
You guys remember Twisted Metal?
Yeah.
Now that was one of the first games that had like a that was one of the first games that had an ending for each character, I feel. And I love that fact about it. I was like, hey, it doesn't just have one ending. It has literally like one for every character, and it's all about like the devil tricking you out of your life. But so I mean, you know, we've talked about the past for sure. Like, I think that those games are great to get us started on this, but let's move on a little bit to games that we feel have influenced gaming and are leaving a legacy to this day. So what I mean by that is games kind of like Grand Theft Auto, Civilization, The Sims, you know, games that still resonate and have versions of themselves to this day. What do you think, Mark? What's a game that you can think of?
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the Mario Brothers series. I mean, there's so many different spin-offs, and you know, they're finding new ways to make the series fresh, even though I think it's gone stale a long time ago. There's 3D platforming, there's Mario Kart, there's so many different variations, but I think, you know, every game they make, it's itself. I think that's the legacy it kind of leaves behind, is that every product they, you know, release, everyone's going to buy.
Mm-hmm. True.
So I'm curious about the Civ and Sims and Icewind Dale. I don't know much about those games. What is it that makes you think that they leave some kind of legacy behind us?
So Civilization, for the most part, for me, the reason why I think that it is like a game that really leaves this mark on the industry is I feel like it was one of the first games that did world building well, but also allowed like a competitive aspect.
Yeah.
I think that it took the board game like Risk and then it put it on computer.
Gotcha.
So you could play with people farther away from you. You could play with friends. And it wasn't a co-op game like Diablo 2, which is also a phenomenal game.
That was amazing.
It was more so a game where you fought against each other. It was strategic. And it touched on a whole different type of gamer, you know? Before then you had like your fighting games. You had some first person shooter elements, you know. You had your platformers, you had your RPGs, but that was the first game I feel that really started and I'm sure there's others, but that's just the one that resonates in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, so like speaking specifically about Baldur's Gate, my roommate plays that game a lot, and I don't really know much about it. I know it's based off D&D. I know there's a whole lot going on there, but I haven't seen a lot of games that go with that specific style of mechanics. Has there been anything out recently that you know of that follows that kind of trend? Or
so Icewind Dale, and then you have Torment, and then you have some other games. Honestly, like with the rise of D&D, recently, and I know that you, Mark, are kind of like you're not on board with it as much as maybe I am because you guys have never done it, but like with shows like Critical Role and with movies like with the Netflix show Stranger Things, like D&D now has a place and a forum. And the community itself is just an excellent community. But the thing that I like about the game aspect of Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and things like that is that these games allow you to take the aspect of D&D, and the one thing that's bad about D&D is finding other players to play with.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it has some mechanics there that you can use.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I think that is that is special about that type of game. And then lastly, I've mentioned Sims because it's maybe not my favorite type of game, but it definitely hit a niche market that had never been touched before.
That was like the mom market. That was basically people who wanted to play house.
The Sims is so fun. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I think this came up with my friend PS2 days, of course. Sims 1. Holy crap! We were making characters, trapping them, between four walls, and they die.
Yeah, like
I played that game super sadistic, just like that.
Go have a baby, lock them in a room without a without a toilet.
What?
I would just put a bunch of rugs on the floor, have a fireplace, leave the fireplace going all the time, and they'd all burn alive.
Okay, my character tried.
I would lock the maids in the house. You'd hire like a maid, and you can never leave. Just keep cleaning our place.
There's not many games that allow you to create a character and then promptly kill that character. There's not a lot of games that let you do that.
As they die, it's funny. All they do is just go and cry in place. Like it's not like something really graphic or grim.
Can you create?
And then you get to have a ghost in the house. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, but what other game can you create a character?
So yeah, what do you think, Matt? What's some games that you think that have left like?
Sorry guys, we just had a little bit of a technical issue here. But yeah, so games that Mark's my apologies. Mark, what were you saying just now?
Oh, I was just saying, what other game other than Sims can you create a character, send them off to college, and have them research, and become smart enough to know that they're being controlled by a person behind a computer?
Yeah. That was the beauty of Sims, is that game really was just absolutely insane as far as, like, if you wanted to play it for real, you could play it for real and be boring and watch people live their lives, and you can go live your own fucking life. Or you could be really sadistic and just make everybody die. That was, that to me, that was, like, the best purpose of that game.
Absolutely. All about trolling in that game.
So, harkening back to what Mark was talking about earlier with Super Mario, I'm just going to go ahead and say Super Nintendo as a whole. Everything that was, or not Super Nintendo, but really Nintendo as a whole. So, really almost every game that they created, starting all the way back at the original NES and going all the way up till now, has been some kind of franchise that they've continued to this day and people have mimicked. So take, for example, you're saying Super Mario, that started on the NES and is still going this day. There's been tons and tons of clones. The whole platformer genre basically started off of that. But then you also have stuff like Mario Kart, which is like an arcade racing game. There's tons of stuff like Burnout. I wouldn't say that Burnout follows the same premise, but there's definitely similarities in terms of like just competitive and how you play competitively and all that. Then you have Zelda influenced the entire RPG market. It's still going to this day. There's still tons of games that play like Zelda. Like, it's just the Nintendo as a whole, if it wasn't for them, the gaming industry wouldn't be where it is right now. We really have to give them credit for bringing it back from the terrible days of Atari and Commodore and all that, where there was tons and tons of publishers putting out just garbage tier games that were complete bullshit that's trying to capitalize on a market that was up and coming at the time. And if it wasn't for Nintendo, we wouldn't be playing what we are playing right now, or at least to the degree that we are right now.
And as much as I love indie games, I feel like there's a huge market on Steam of garbage games right now.
There absolutely is. And there will always be a market for market of garbage games, because garbage games, for the most part, are like, if you look at any market, there's going to to be really good products, and there's going to be okay products, and there's going to be just garbage products that you're like, why the fuck did I spend my money on this?
Yeah. I think it's like get rich quick companies. They're
Yeah.
like, we can sell a few thousand copies of this game and make our money for it.
Hey, let's make Bejeweled 9,000.
Hold on, Bejeweled is fun, but does it deserve 5 sequels? No.
I mean, what couldn't you do on the first Bejeweled?
I mean, if you
Yeah,
go onto the
different-
mobile market and you play any game that has any kind of advertisements in it, every advertisement that comes up is some kind of game that's like, choose your adventurer, now swap the jewels to attack the monster. It's like, what the fuck? Just let me attack the fucking monster. Like, why do I have to switch some bullshit jewels for
Want to
this?
attack the monster? They'll be $4.99.
Yeah.
24 hours.
Oh, sorry, you ran out of lives and you only started with one. That'll be $3.50.
Or you can beg your friends on Facebook.
Yeah. Or you can piss off everybody that is, near and dear to you, or all the randoms that you have on Facebook, and just send them a bunch of invites to bullshit that they don't care about, like Farmville.
Little bit of Bubble Witch, man. That's all I'm saying. Farmville. Oh my gosh, Farmville.
But yeah, Nintendo really did, as a whole, just basically save the entire video game market. Really, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be where we're at right now. That is for sure.
So, with that said, like, do you guys have any honorable mentions for games that you think shaped gaming within the last like 10 years? Maybe games that aren't as iconic to you, but that you think are pretty sweet and they need to get a shout out. I'll start. I think that, and Lawless is throwing up Larry Leisure Shoot. Oh, yeah. That's like, was that the one with the dude that was in college? And like, it's just about him, like, joining frats, getting drunk, and getting women naked.
Maybe. I'm not sure. I never played that one.
Okay, yeah. I briefly saw a little bit of it. I have never played it, but I've seen like highlights.
An honorable mention for me is Conker's Bad Fur Day, and mainly because that game pissed off so many people. And anytime you piss off a bunch of parents, beautiful things typically ensue. Like with Grand Theft Auto, it pissed off so many people.
Gosh.
Mortal Kombat pissed off so many people. And some of the best things that ever happened in life are whenever a bunch of parents get pissed off. And to me, those games have been just left a monstrous legacy behind them, because you still have that shock genre of games where there's just like absolutely ridiculous things happening and it pisses people off. And that, to me, those are some of the most beautiful games.
Yeah, I think it's the first aspects of censoring, like, what is able to be censored and what isn't,
Yeah, there was that game Manhunt. I don't know if you guys remember that one. I think that was on Xbox, the original Xbox. I could be wrong, but that game was like super
PS2.
gory. It was on PS2, so there was it was super gory. You like dismember people and just like brutally torture people and destroy people and all that stuff. And it was super controversial. And it got banned in a bunch of different countries because it was so brutal. And looking back on it, that game's the graphics and what you did in that game were just child's play at the time. If they wanted to create some pure brutality right now, they could create some absolutely monstrously disgusting stuff, like the new Resident Evil 7, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have played that at all, but like just watching VODs of it, it has like there's gory as fuck, some seriously
I'm not allowed to
crazy
play those
shit.
games, Matt. It's past my bedtime already.
There you go. So, I mean, I have a couple honorable mentions, and a lot of these games, they're not in the same genre, but they influence the esports scene. Got to go back to Unreal Tournament,
Yeah, for sure.
Counter-Strike,
Yeah.
and StarCraft. These games sort of skyrocketed or kind of jump-started the esports scene. We see now League of Legends is the biggest, probably the most popular game in the world. Counter-Strike.
With Overwatch,
Some of the most played games are, this is where they got the roots from.
Yeah, so Counter-Strike's still going strong too. Like, it's still a really, really popular game.
Which blows my mind. I mean, maybe just because I freaking hate that game because I'm completely garbage at it. But like, for me personally, I can't get into it.
Okay.
But I mean, I think it's branched off to, for other developers to create games like it. Call of Duty, I think, is Call of Duty is here because of Counter-Strike.
For sure.
At least the competitive side of it.
You don't think Halo?
No, not
I
really.
feel like I played Halo, and then I realized there were nothing but 13-year-old kids on it, and then I
Okay,
bought
well,
Call of
Halo-
Duty, and I actually liked it.
Okay, I think Counter-Strike and Unreal Tournament are like the roots, and they've grown into Battlefield, Call of Duty, and Halo.
Okay.
And some of the more recent shooters.
I also feel like Counter-Strike is a very European game. I feel
It's
like
definitely more a European dominated game.
yeah.
What was Counter-Strike like a Half-Life mod? Is that what it was? Is that how it got started?
Yeah, it started
Half-Life.
off as a Half-Life mod, and
I never played the original Half-Life. I played Half-Life 2, and that game was super crazy. It was a lot of fun.
And so I'm just gonna throw out like some names of games real quick because I just want to.
Yeah.
Disgaea, Chrono Trigger. What's another one? You threw up Musashi. What was it? Brave Fencer Musashi.
I mean, it's not a very.
No. These aren't the kind of games. These are just games that need to be talked about.
Yeah.
They just need to be mentioned.
No. I mean, since we're mentioning honorable mentions, what would be your guys' top 5 games of all time?
Oh, that's tough. That's a on the spot thinking right there. Right now, my top 1 of games that I've ever played is The Witcher 3, and I know that's like a super generic answer, especially for like right now. But that game seriously just blew my mind. There was not a single point in that game, even though it was open world, that made me feel like I was just doing random nonsense and random bullshit that had no impact on the world. Most of it didn't have impact on the world, but they were able to craft it in a way that made it feel like there was impact on the world. So if I could really even just put The Witcher 3 as like in my top 5, I would, just because there hasn't been another game that I've enjoyed for the amount of time that I put into that one.
Yeah, Witcher 3 is
It
sick.
just goes to show you how
awesome.
good the game is. If it's so recent and it's your favorite game of all time.
For sure. It's so good.
I mean, in the same vein, I think Skyrim. I also think like my top 5 played games that I keep going back to would be Final Fantasy VII. I still play it on my phone to this day, which is crazy. Ride some chocobos, and then I think Diablo 2 would be one of my favorites because I bought like 4 copies of that game.
Yeah.
I kept like saying, nah, I don't want to play this anymore. And then recently I was talking to one of my friends. I was like, hey man, you still got your Diablo 2 like disc? And he's like, yeah, I don't even know if you can play it like on the servers anymore.
Why don't you hop on Diablo 3?
Nah, Diablo 3 is my life. I don't want to talk about that. I'm so upset. That makes me butt hurt. But and then so Final Fantasy VII, Diablo 2. I would say Icewind Dale, which you guys should check out. It's a super awesome game. I actually think League for me because it was the first competitive game that I really played, and have keep playing even though I hate it sometimes. And it was the first game that got me into esports, which is super important because I've never had anything that I've enjoyed watching as much as I have like esports. Like I keep going to it, and I've never been like a huge football, baseball like fan or anything, and so I'm absolutely in love that there's professional video games that I can get into.
What about you, Mark?
So, I mean, I'm glad Pigeon brought up the whole thing about games he spent the most time on, because I actually came up with a list. One side, it's my favorite games of all time, and on the other side, games I probably spent the most time on. And the funny thing is, none of the games on either list match up, or like they don't pop up twice. So games I spent the most time on, number 5 and 4, it's probably a toss-up between Call of Duty and Battlefield. And it's weird because on this list, it's a lot of multiplayer or a lot of kind of like MMO games. So it would be Call of Duty, Battlefield, World of Warcraft, RuneScape, and probably number 1, and I probably spent the most money on, League of Legends, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when I move over to my favorite games of all time, I think this is where you can see where my list is influenced. A lot of RPGs, a lot of JRPGs. Number 5 would be Shadow of the Colossus. Number 4 would be The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Number 3 is actually the newest game on this list, and that's Yakuza 0. If you guys haven't played that yet,
I haven't. I need to, I
it's
guess.
the best game. It's hilarious. It's sad. It's amazing.
Those games are all on PlayStation, aren't they?
Hey, before you say your number one, I want to do like a guess.
Okay, but going back to Yakuza 0, the amazing thing about that is Sega is kind of going all in with the series, and Yakuza 0 released last year, February. They've released 3 games since.
Holy
Think about that.
shit.
That's 4 games in 2 years.
That's
amazing.
insane.
Each game is really good, quality stuff. Number 2 would be Final Fantasy X. And then number 1, Pigeon, what's your guess?
Persona.
Okay.
Am I right?
Yes, you are right. I talk about it way too much. I'm basically obsessed with the game. I have like 5 different copies of the same game. But no. So Final Fantasy or Persona 5 would be on this list, but then I only wanted to put 1 game per series, and that would be Persona 4, because that was a console seller. Like, I played that game. It's an 80-plus hour game, and I beat that game in under a week.
Wow, good lord.
And then the crazy thing about it was I started the game right up at 2 in the morning after I beat it, and it started playing.
You put in, like, construction worker time on that.
Oh, yeah. I was playing it on the charger. I was playing it while I was eating. It was just amazing.
So, as far as my top 5 go, I'm going to have to, of course, I already said Witcher 3. That'll probably be the number 1. Fallout 3. Now, I know, Pigeon, you're a big fan of New Vegas. New Vegas was really awesome. Whenever I played it, I didn't get into it as much, and it might have been because I had habits at the time that were unscrupulous. But Fallout 3, that game was freaking amazing. I had such a blast in it. And maybe that one was my favorite just because, like, the world and universe of itself was brand new to me. But God, I freaking loved it. Like, there was a point where I was collecting bottle caps just because I was like, I'm preparing for the end of the world, guys. I'm preparing.
You just wanted to like in real life?
Yeah. I was legit collecting bottle caps.
If you haven't played Fallout 1 and 2, then you haven't played Fallout.
I haven't played either of those games, but I probably should at some point. Number 3, this is going to sound weird, but Guitar Hero. I've been playing guitar for like Guitar Hero 3 specifically. I've been playing guitar for like 12 years now, something of that nature. And whenever Guitar Hero 3 came out, I was really, really, really bad at guitar. And what that game helped me do was synchronize movements between both of my hands so that I would be able to play with rhythmically better. And if it wasn't for playing that game and playing everything on expert, I even got through the Fire and Flames on expert, which was stupid and there's no reason I should have beat it, but I did. And if it wasn't for playing that game, I probably wouldn't have the chops that I have on guitar right now, just because that game helped me get my rhythm and sequence, and it was so amazing.
Yeah, I could play Nirvana's heart-shaped box while not looking at the TV behind my back.
God, that was
on Guitar Hero.
So much fun.
Yeah, I love that series too because it did introduce me to like a couple different bands. At the time, I was introduced to Aerosmith because I got that for Christmas.
Nice.
I also got Metallica as well, and then I love those 2 bands now.
I had never heard of the band In Flames until Take This Life was on Guitar Hero 3, and that game was that song was so hard to play on expert, but it was such a blast. Number 2 would probably be Lineage 2, like I was talking about earlier, and then number 1 is going to be, that one's kind of tough. I'm not 100% sure what I would put there. I would probably say Final Fantasy X as well. And main reason for that is that's the only JRPG that I've played like obsessively from beginning to end and completed without really stopping. I have a really bad habit of like starting a game, playing like 10, 15 hours, moving to whatever the next shiny object is, going back later, next shiny object, rinse and repeat. But whenever I started Final Fantasy X, again, I was like 23, 24, something like at the time. And whenever I played that, I played from 0 to 100% without stopping and doing other things just because I was so enthralled by the story. If I were to interject another game, and it's a more recent one, Tales of Berseria. That's another JRPG that was just fucking incredible. The story of that was just absolutely incredible. I think it's a highly underrated game and a lot of not talked about with recent games, but that game was also amazing. But yeah, that's my top 5.
That's a pretty good top 5.
Very
Your top 5 went from 1 to 1. Did you realize that?
Hey, I never said I was good at math.
He's like,
I can put
my
2 and
first
2
game
together and
is-
make 7, all right?
well, so since we mentioned those, I guess we've talked about the past. We've talked about influential games that we thought and that are leaving a legacy to this day, and honorable mentions of those. Let's talk about current games that we love. And I wrote down League, and we've talked about League, but I'm not sure if I love it or just have to keep doing it. Like it's like cocaine.
Yeah.
It's exactly like cocaine. Yes.
I think the thing that I like about League is
hell of a
that
drug.
it was, and it's also one of those games that I have tons of friends that I've met from other like walks of life,
Yeah.
and from other areas. I've usually just played with people that I know like locally, and this is the first game that I played where that's how we met you, Mark. The Red Raccoon. And,
Only.
yeah, I wouldn't have. And I mean, I think you met one of our buddies, Pagan, on like Reddit.
Okay, so I do owe League, some credit and some love just because of the people it's that I met through it, and I don't mean to get sentiment about it, but then some of the people that I hang out the most with these days I've met through League.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Yeah, League of Legends does a really good job of bringing people together, because whenever you find someone who isn't a complete paste eater at the game and start playing with that person, and then there's this bonding thing that happens whenever you're playing in a 45-minute death match between a bunch of angry teenagers.
Yeah.
We rage together.
Gosh, it's also where I first learned that people love to be toxic to other people when they don't see you in face to face.
Jesus.
Like in real life, if someone told me that they hoped that I got cancer and died, they probably wouldn't say that to me. But I get that on a regular basis on League.
It's like, I can't believe that I died. You should be a leukemia patient.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's so toxic.
Yeah, incredibly toxic. But whenever you find people who aren't like that, you really do end up bonding with those people.
I mean,
I
that's
was introduced to the drink bleach, so
yeah. And then you just need to just start spamming your mom jokes, and then they eventually stop. Like I swear, your mom
And then you
jokes are
get
the
friend
best.
requests.
Yeah, then you get friend requests. How about you, Mark? What do you think is? So you said League, but do you think there's any other game that you currently play? So you just mentioned that JRPG a minute ago. What about the story games that you've been playing lately, like the Japanese-based ones?
Okay, so there's a lot. There's a shopping list of games. First of all, I just like to give a shout out to Fortnite because that game's awesome, and I've been playing that a ton.
Speaking of Fortnite, we have Lawless Lemons. He is one of the streamers that is associated with our company, and he's big on Fortnite. He plays it a lot. That and Smite. Check out his stream sometime. I think Mark plays Fortnite too, but you don't want to watch him because
You don't want to.
I mean, who wants to watch
What you do want
that?
to watch is my shirt. Just you mad, bro?
Yes.
Pride.com.
Little shameless plug there.
Fortnite is awesome, and I would say this is like the correct way to do microtransactions because everything is basically or mostly cosmetic. It's not pay to win, and it just makes your character look awesome. Anyways, shout out to them. But the games I am playing right now are a lot of JRPGs. Recently going back to the Shin Megami Tensei series, and if you've never played this series, it's like think Pokemon, as in like the Game Boy games, if they had demons, and that's basically what you get, and it's awesome.
Demonic Pokemon, sweet.
Demonic Pokemon, it's awesome. And the spin-off Persona, of course, is my favorite series of all time. So I'm going back to play older games from that series, and I'm actually going to start streaming pretty soon. Playing those games. So a lot of Let's Plays coming up, so stay tuned. Right now, though, I am playing Ni no Kuni 2. And if you've never played that and you're a JRPG fan, this is a must-buy at some point. Doesn't matter when, just buy it. I mean, in my opinion, it's a little too easy, but then the story's interesting. And if you like Studio Ghibli, this is the game for you because it just it screams Studio Ghibli.
Yeah,
and it's awesome.
I'm actually thinking about delving into some Overwatch because I feel like that's the future of esports. I've been watching a lot of like what they're doing publicly and what they're doing with their money and with the sport in itself. And we mentioned this a little bit last week, but how they're like kind of going to city sponsored, which I think is a good idea. And I like the fact that it brings together the aspect of League with a feel of COD.
So I'm not super familiar with all the esport terms and all that stuff, but what does city sponsored mean?
So city sponsored means that the cities themselves are using their names for their teams.
Gotcha.
So you know how like in football and stuff you have like
yeah.
you have like the Los Angeles whatever, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah,
the
yeah.
New York blah.
Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, Philadelphia Eagles.
Go
Well,
Eagles.
so what Overwatch is doing is they're doing like the LA Gladiators.
Yeah.
And the Houston Outlaws.
Yeah.
So I like that fact that they are bringing a city into it, because then whenever you get a location that kind of surrounds, it brings more viability to it and longevity to it as a whole.
Hey, Pigeon, quick question, and I think you can answer this.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of the teams in Overwatch, I've heard a lot about the different teams, and I've seen teams from Houston. There's Los Angeles. I believe there's a team in Boston, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
But
Boston.
I've also seen teams from different countries. So there's a Chinese team. There's a Korean team.
Mm-hmm.
Are these guys all in the same league, or is it just
So
separate leagues to their own?
I'm
countries?
still kind of just getting into it. I haven't watched all the matches. I believe that they are coming over internationally right now, but I also believe that they have some roots within their own home countries. I think that Overwatch hasn't gotten to the state that League has gotten to, though, where you can have multiple regions yet. So really, I think it just has kind of like an NA region that's a large one, and it's the one that's mainly televised that I can tell. I think that I don't know. One thing that I've really realized about Overwatch is the amount of like girls that are fans of it. So normally, like when I talk with people about esports, it's dudes, but Overwatch is starting to be appreciated a lot more by girls, and I think that like players like Surefour are to get credit for that, because he's such a charismatic dude, and he knows how to reach out to that demographic. Good job. Yeah. Not dim a Pokemon.
Yeah.
Which Mark
Demon
likes to
Pokemon.
talk about.
Okay, which is awesome. This is just a side note, but then I thought it was awesome because a girl came into work and she turned in a resume, and I noticed on the resume she put top 100 NA player in Overwatch. I thought that was awesome.
That is awesome. Nice.
There we go. Automatically hired.
So sorry to hot
Exactly.
topics right here. You were talking about Ni no Kuni too earlier, and I've been interested in getting that game, and I haven't. I've looked at some reviews of it, and a lot of people are saying that it's got like a really childish story to it. Do you feel that way, or is it a pretty mature story? How do you feel about the story of it?
I think the theme can target adult audiences, but then the actual story and dialogue, I feel like it is a little childish.
Yeah.
But if you've watched any Studio Ghibli movies, that's just what it is. And I think that influences the game as a whole. I think it's a little too easy.
Yeah.
They play it safe. The actual fights are easy. The system is easy, but I think you can have a lot of fun, especially you said you were a fan of Tales of Berseria.
Yeah, yeah.
It is, I believe the developer is Level 5, and it's published by Namco Bandai, which is the same publisher as the Tales series.
Gotcha.
I think the combat is directly out of that series.
Gotcha.
And it's your typical action RPG game, but what's cool is they added a lot of different mechanics to it. So there's the action RPG, there's RTS, which is awesome. There's also a kingdom building kind of mini game, and I think it's a really good game. if you're not going into it thinking it's Shin Megami Tensei and it's dark.
One of the biggest issues that I have with a lot of JRPGs that I played, and maybe I played the wrong ones, is that they usually have really, really childish stories to them where it's all like friends, that kind of thing. You know,
I like Friends.
I mean, everybody likes Friends, but they're all like, we will strive to do perfection through friendship, like that kind of stuff. And it just,
Okay, well, in this game,
God, that
he
shit
is
kills
trying
me.
in this game, he is the kid, King Evan. He's probably like 10. He is trying to create a kingdom without
friends.
war. And yeah, you're all friends. But the ironic thing is you're killing a bunch of people doing this.
Hey, you can't make a happy kingdom without can't make a what is it? You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Yeah? So with that said, let's talk about the future of games. And I want to touch on, I know that Hearthstone's been out for a while, but I actually think that card games are going to become more of a thing. I see less and less people go to store, more and more people play online. And so I think games like Hearthstone and I think Magic has recently put out something where they've actually had an increase in online play. Mm-hmm. And different games like that. I think that's going to be something that we're going to see some more of. Plus, I think, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but I think that story-based games, where you just basically are choose your own path stories, I think that is going to be a whole new thing that's really, really going to hit hard this year. And I think, and in the next few years to come, and I believe the reason for that is that less and less people are watching like DirecTV and stuff. More and more people are online watching YouTube and Netflix and Hulu, and that will eventually transition into games where instead of just watching something, you can actually interact with it.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
For sure. I think like the storytelling games, Telltale, they started off with, Walking Dead, a couple others, but then now there's Telltale Batman, there's, there's a ton of different series, Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think it's going to bloom like into a huge genre and it's going to be really popular.
I mean, as long as the content's good, that's all that matters. The worry that I have whenever you start having a publisher do that kind of thing is that, as always with any corporate atmosphere, revenue becomes the primary thought. And whenever they start having all these deadlines that make it so things get pushed out before they should, stories start to become compromised. So that's a concern that I have with a lot of these games, is that if they do start pumping them out like crazy, you may see a shift away from having really high quality products that are trying to lure people in to purchase their product, and more to just capitalize on an existing fan base.
And that's more bubble witches.
Yeah.
and Bejeweled.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the future of gaming, I think mobile flopped. I don't think mobile gaming is the way to go, but I think the future of gaming would be indie games. And that's where developers can, spend less money. They can do what they want and just shell out games left and right. And, unfortunately, probably 90% of those games are going to be garbage. And 10% are going to be awesome.
Absolutely. Garbage. But that's the beauty of the internet, is that we can talk to each other about stuff and yell vitriol at each other until we realize, hey, this game's not that bad.
So with that said, we're coming pretty much to the end of our podcast. And I think we've touched on a lot of cool stuff, but we haven't touched on the thing that was streaming this whole time during our podcast. And that is the fall of TSM and the rise of a different team for Final 2. The old guard is dead. Long live the new teams. This is a new era in esports. Sorry, Reggie.
No, hold on.
Your pay train is no longer paying.
Team Liquid is the final hope.
They've never been Final 2.
But they're gonna win this season.
Yeah, that's great. It's going to be someone new. And even though I'm a huge C9 fan, like more so I'm just happy that TSM didn't win. I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly...
It's all Reggie's fault. You shouldn't got rid of X-Special. That was a bad move.
He should have gotten rid of X-Special. He should have gotten rid of X-Special. Maybe not double lift, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Sven and Mithy are gone, I think.
They're all gone.
He's gonna try to pick up Hakuo, and Hakuo is gonna do bad, and then he's gonna get rid of him too.
Honestly, I think this is good for TSM. I mean, as dominant as they are for like the last 8 seasons, I think there was never a moment in any point of the season where I thought TSM was the clear-cut favorites. Because if you think about it, season 3, TSM won the first split, but Curse was probably the best team. And in the following 2 years, it was Cloud9 that was leaps and bounds above everyone.
Yeah.
And I just never thought TSM was ever that good. And the season where they have Yellowstar, they had no business going to the finals. And so I think this loss is actually a good thing for them.
Yeah, I am kind of worried for Bjergsen because I feel like they're gonna. I don't know. Reggie is a loose cannon. he likes to get rid of people because he's always shooting for worlds, and he doesn't like building synergy in his teams. In my opinion, I think he has a big influence on that. But that's whatever. Opinions are like a-holes. We all have them.
Bjergsen is on the Forbes top, I think Forbes top 100 under 25 or something. I think he's fine.
He's no. He is on the chopping block, Mark. His time is done. He's going to go back to Europe and buy a small country and marry a princess, and that's going to be it. Name his first kid Syndra. All right, so with that said, is there any shout outs or anything that you guys want to do to anybody?
Only you, Pigeon.
I'm going to give a shout out to my oldest daughter, Riley. I told her I would. Riley, you're awesome. Oh, you still can't be a YouTube star yet, and you also cannot play on Twitch because you're too young. But other than that,
I'm going to give a shout out to my coworker Lorenzo. I talked to him all day about this podcast. I'm pretty sure he's tired of hearing about it. I don't think he has any interest, but he said he would watch, which I doubt.
He did watch. He's not here. Lorenzo left you.
You know what? I will show him this VOD.
All right, sweet. All right, and with that said, the last thing I just want to say is that OGRE Tribe has put out a new line of clothing, and it's D&D related, guys. So go on there, check it out. We got some new wares. We're coming out with some more stuff in the future. We have some more plans coming. We're trying to get with more streaming partners like Lawless, and we're just going to keep growing because we're going to be consistent with this. And doggone it, we're going to do it until somebody likes us. Yeah. So
we want to quit our job.
Yeah. Exactly. We want to move Mark out here so he can help pay rent.
I don't know about that. It's kind of nice in California right now.
You mean you don't want to live in the frigid tundras of Virginia?
No. Winter is not here. Winter is not coming.
Winter is coming.
So next week we're gonna have it at the same time, 8:30. So be here for that. We really appreciate you guys tuning in, and we are going to probably talk about things such as saltiness and raging. And toxicity in games. So that's going to be
better with ice or without ice.
With that said, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.